I prepared Christmas dinner for 6 hours straight with arthritic hands that wouldn't stop trembling. My son promised he'd be here. At 6 p.m., a delivery boy handed me an envelope. Mom, we decided to eat at Linda's parents instead. Maybe next year. 10 minutes later, I saw their smiling faces on Facebook, toasting champagne with her family. I'm 72, widowed, and suddenly invisible. If you've ever felt replaced by someone who was supposed to love you, follow my story to the end. Comment your city below. I want to know where kindness still exists. By the end, you'll understand why some betrayals can become unexpected blessings. I should have known. Maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want to believe it. It was my first Christmas without Robert. He passed in March, 74 years old. Good heart, terrible lungs. He went quickly, peacefully, they said. But there's nothing peaceful about coming home to a quiet house after 50 years of marriage. Nothing peaceful about waking up to silence every morning. So this year, I made a plan. I decided I'd host Christmas dinner. Just a small one, my son, Thomas, and his wife, Linda. That's it. No big fuss. I just didn't want to be alone. I spent 2 days cooking, not just heating up food cooking. I made Robert's cornbread stuffing from scratch, ham glazed with brown sugar and pineapple rings, mashed potatoes whipped with sour cream and butter, just the way Thomas liked them when he was growing up. Pecan pie, sweet tea, rolls, a green bean casserole that took 2 tries to get right. I even baked cookies, knowing Linda pretends she doesn't eat sweets, but always sneaks one. The house smelled like home. I hadn't felt that in months. I bought a real tree, too, not one of those pre-lit ones from the garage. A fresh fir cost me nearly $100, but I didn't care. Robert would have said it was too much, but he always smiled when he saw it twinkling. I hung all the old ornaments, our wedding photo in the little red frame, Thomas's macaroni star from second grade, the glass cardinal that broke and was glued back together in '92. And I wore the red dress Robert always said I looked beautiful in, the one with the pearl buttons. I hadn't worn it in years, but I needed to feel like myself. I fixed my hair the way he liked it and put on some lipstick. I even got out the china we only ever use at Thanksgiving. Dinner was at 3. I set the table at noon. By 1, everything was ready. The ham rested, the rolls covered in foil, the tea chilling in the fridge. I lit the candles and put on Bing Crosby. The house looked like something out of a magazine. And for the first time in months, I felt proud, excited, nervous, even. At 2:30, I texted Thomas. Just a simple, see you soon. No response. At 3, I sat by the window. At 3:15, I started checking my phone. Maybe traffic. Maybe Linda had trouble getting ready. By 3:30, the food was starting to cool. I put the rolls back in the oven, lowered the music. Still no call, no text. At 3:45, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. I smoothed my dress and hurried to the door. But it wasn't them. It was a courier. Some college kid in a windbreaker holding a manila envelope. Delivery for Mrs. Elizabeth Carter. Yes, I said, confused. He handed it to me and walked away without a word. I stood there on the porch, the wind biting through my dress sleeves, staring at the envelope in my hands. Inside was a note written in Linda's neat, looping handwriting. Elizabeth, we're so sorry. We decided to spend Christmas at my mom's house this year. It was a last-minute change. We hope you understand. Love, Linda. No explanation, no apology, no let's reschedule, just that they decided. I knew it. The silence, the vague answers about timing, the way Thomas hadn't called all week. They didn't forget. They chose not to come. I stood in my perfect kitchen, food still warm on the stove, candles flickering low, the table set for 3, and realized I'd been waiting for something that was never going to happen. I poured a glass of tea and sat at the head of the table. I looked across at the 2 empty plates and tried to eat, but my throat wouldn't let me swallow. I stared at the ham I'd basted, the pie I'd cooled, the stuffing I'd made by hand. None of it mattered now. The house felt cold again. No matter how warm the oven was, I turned off the music, blew out the candles, packed the food into containers, and slid them into the fridge, all except the pea. I left that out on the counter, untouched. The phone never rang. No text, no photos, no Merry Christmas. Later that evening, I opened Facebook. Linda's mother had posted a picture, her dining room table full, house, wine glasses, plates half empty. Thomas was sitting beside Linda, holding her hand, smiling. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I just stared at the screen and thought, they didn't just forget. They left me out on purpose. And that's when I knew something had changed. Maybe not just this year. Maybe it had been changing for a long time, and I just didn't want to see it. But now I did, and I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the tree lights still glowing. Just me in that quiet house. The chair where Robert used to sit was right across from me. I used to complain he always fell asleep there after dinner, snoring through the Hallmark movies. Now I'd give anything to hear that sound again. I thought back to Christmases when Thomas was little. Robert would string the lights on the porch while I baked sugar cookies in the kitchen. Thomas used to run around in his footy pajamas, more excited about the wrapping paper than the toys. Robert always insisted on reading The Night Before Christmas by the fire. He'd hold the book open with one hand and pull Thomas onto his lap with the other. That chair belonged to Robert. But on Christmas Eve, it always fit them both. We had our traditions. I'd make a big breakfast, Christmas morning eggs, sausage, cinnamon rolls. Robert would sneak a piece of pie before lunch, and I'd pretend not to notice. The day always ended with us sitting on the couch, tired and happy, watching the same old Christmas movies we'd seen 100 times before. But after Thomas got married, things started changing. The first Christmas they were married, Linda said they were spending it with her parents. I understood. Newlyweds want to make new memories. I told them we'd do something the week after. Then the next year, it was the same. We're going to Linda's folks again. I told myself it was just a phase. They were young, busy, juggling work and travel. I didn't want to be one of those mothers who made everything about herself. Still, every year it seemed like I became more of a backup plan. When they did visit, it was always rushed. We can't stay long. We have to head back before traffic gets bad. Linda never helped in the kitchen. She'd sit with her phone, scrolling or taking calls while I cooked. Thomas would try to act like he was helping, but he was glued to her side, waiting for her signal that it was time to go. Last year, they showed up 2 hours late, already full from eating at her mother's house. They poked at their food, complimented everything just enough to be polite, then left before dessert. Still, I kept trying. I thought if I just made it nice enough, warm enough, familiar enough, they'd come around. That maybe once they saw what they were missing, they'd remember what it used to feel like. But this year was different. I was alone. Robert wasn't here. And for the first time, they didn't even bother to show up. They didn't even call. I sat there wondering what I did wrong. Did I push too hard? Did I guilt them too much? Did I talk about Robert too often and make the house feel heavy? Or maybe I wasn't modern enough. Maybe I talked too much about how things used to be. Maybe Linda didn't like that I kept Robert's old flannel robe hanging on the hook by the front door, or that I still used the landline. I don't know. I reached for my tablet and scrolled through Facebook again. I don't usually look through Linda's mother's page, but that night I did. There they were, all smiles. Long table, white tablecloth, shiny dishes, candles glowing, Linda in a green sweater, holding a glass of red wine, Thomas beside her, laughing at something someone said. Her mother had written, "So grateful for a house full of family this Christmas." There was even a caption under one photo, "Thankful for another year, surrounded by love." It stung more than I expected, not because they were happy, but because they didn't even think of me when they wrote that. I looked at the time, 9:41 p.m. Still nothing from Thomas. Not even a message to say Merry Christmas. I thought maybe he'd text when things quieted down. He always used to, even during college, even when he was overseas for work. But now, silence. I looked around my living room. The stockings still hung on the fireplace. One for me, one for Robert, one for Thomas. I hadn't taken them down yet. I don't know why. Maybe I thought seeing them would keep things feeling normal. But nothing felt normal. The house wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. Like something had been taken from it. Not just Robert, not just the noise, but the connection, the feeling that I belonged in someone's life. I walked over to the dining table and started clearing the plates. The food had gone cold. I packed it all into containers, every bite untouched. I wrapped the puya and set it in the fridge. I didn't want to see it on the counter in the morning. As I wiped down the table, I glanced over at Robert's chair again. I remembered the year Thomas bought him a bottle of bourbon and said, "Dad deserves something special this Christmas." I remembered Robert tearing up. He wasn't an emotional man, but that moment touched him. And now, just a few years later, his son didn't even pick up the phone. I sat down on the edge of the bed later that night, still in that red dress. My hair was falling out of its pins, and the mascara I'd carefully put on that afternoon had smudged. I was 72 years old, and somehow in the span of one holiday, I felt older than I ever had before. That night, I lay in bed with the lights off, Robert's old robe folded beside me, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit, not even to myself. Thomas had started letting go of me a long time ago. I just hadn't noticed until now. They didn't just abandon me. They made sure I saw it. If that doesn't sting, I don't know what will. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I hadn't really slept, just laid there thinking. The tree lights were still glowing in the living room. I hadn't turned them off the night before. The house was quiet, too quiet. I didn't bother making coffee right away. I pulled on a sweater and stepped outside into the cold. The yard was still damp from overnight frost. I wrapped my arms around myself and walked the stone path out toward the garden. Robert used to say that walking in the yard first thing in the morning helped him think. I didn't understand it back then. Now I do. I walked past the raised beds we used to tend together, past the old bench that needed sanding, and stopped at the bird feeder hanging from the maple tree. I wasn't sure why. Maybe just habit. Robert used to refill it every Saturday like clockwork, and that's when I saw it. There was an envelope tucked just behind the feeder, wedged between the post and the wooden roof. It was sealed but dusty around the edges, like it had been there for some time. I took it down slowly. The handwriting was what stopped me cold. It was Robert's slanted cursive, a little shaky but still neat. I ran my fingers across my name, just Elizabeth. No last name, no address, just like how he used to label my birthday cards. The corner of the envelope was stamped with the date 8 months ago, 1 month before he passed. I just stood there for a second, holding it, back inside. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at it for a while. I wasn't sure I was ready to read it, but I opened it anyway. His writing filled one sheet. No greeting, no small talk. Just, "If you're reading this, something has happened. I hoped wouldn't. Go to my desk, the top drawer. There's more." That's all he wrote. I pushed back from the table and went straight to the study. Robert's old desk was still just how he left it, his pens lined up. Calculator beside a legal pad with numbers scribbled in the margin. I opened the top drawer. There, taped to the bottom of the inside panel, was another envelope. This one thicker. He had folded the edges to seal it tight, and there was a paper clip holding a small gold key. Inside the envelope was a folded note in a printed document, but it was the note that I read first. "Elizabeth, if Thomas ever shuts you out, this will make sense. You'll find everything you need to know at the place this key opens. It's yours. Always was. You just didn't know it, Dan." That was it. I sat there, key in one hand, letter in the other, feeling the weight of something I didn't yet understand. He planned this. Robert, with his quiet ways and calm voice, had left something behind, something he didn't trust our son to protect. I took a breath and looked back at the folded paper that had come with the key. It was a deed, legal looking, with my name on it. I read the address twice to be sure. It was a place in Hendersonville, about 45 minutes from our house in Asheville. I didn't recognize the street. Robert had never mentioned any other property to me. I thought we owned one house, the house we lived in. I pulled out my phone and typed the address into the map. It popped up as a cottage on a quiet road near the mountains. No photos, no listing, just a red pin on the screen. I sat there for a long time, trying to piece it together. Why would Robert keep a place from me? Why leave a key behind? And why now? But the note kept echoing in my mind. If Thomas ever shuts you out, he knew. He saw it coming. Maybe not this exact Christmas. Maybe not Linda's note on my doorstep, but something. He knew something about Thomas that I didn't want to admit, that he could turn cold, that he could forget where he came from. Robert had always been quieter about these things. I was the one who believed in giving second chances. Third ones, too. Robert, he kept records, mental and written. I picked up the key and turned it in my hand. Smooth edges, brass, looked old, but still would work fine. Whatever door it opened, Robert wanted me to find it when I needed answers, and I needed them now. I looked over at the picture on the bookshelf, the one of me, Robert, and Thomas when he graduated from college. Robert had his hand on Thomas's shoulder. I was holding on to Robert's arm. We were all smiling, but even now I could see it. Robert's eyes weren't on the camera, they were on Thomas, watching him. That night, I packed a small bag, a few clothes, flashlight, extra pair of shoes. I didn't know what I was driving into, but something told me I shouldn't wait. Whatever Robert left behind, it was waiting, and now I was ready to find it. As I zipped the bag shut, I caught sight of the red dress I'd worn the day before, still hanging on the back of the chair. It looked different now, not like a holiday memory, but like a reminder of what was missing, of who I used to be when I thought family would always be there. Robert had been gone almost a year, but somehow it felt like he'd just spoken to me for the first time in months, and I was finally ready to listen. I left just after sunrise. It was cold out, but the roads were clear. I brought a thermos of coffee and a peanut butter sandwich, just in case I got hungry. That's how Robert always packed for trips, even short ones. Take more than you need, just in case, he'd say. The GPS said 46 minutes to the address in Hendersonville. I drove past rolling hills and winter trees, past gas stations I'd stopped at over the years, but I didn't recognize the road when I got close. It was tucked behind a small hardware store, then down a gravel path with no sign. I had to slow the car and check the numbers twice before I found it. There it was, an old white farmhouse with blue shutters and a stone porch. Nothing fancy, not run down either. Just quiet, like it was waiting for someone. I pulled into the gravel driveway and parked. The front steps creaked as I walked up. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the key. It slid into the lock like it belonged. When the door clicked open, something inside me shifted, like a memory you didn't know you had suddenly comes rushing back. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The air was warm, like someone had been there recently. Everything was clean, not spotless, but taken care of. There was a small entryway with a wooden bench, boots lined up neatly beside it, a coat rack with one of Robert's old jackets hanging there. I took a few steps forward into the living room, and that's when I saw the pictures. On the mantel above the fireplace, there were framed photos. One of me and Robert at the beach, another from our 35th anniversary. One I hadn't seen before, Robert sitting in a rocking chair on this very porch, holding a cup of coffee. I looked around and realized all the furniture matched our taste. Not store-bought sets, but pieces Robert had refinished over the years. The lamp with the little stain on the shade, the quilt from our old guest room. It was like someone had taken pieces of our life and set them up in this house. There was a folded note sitting on the coffee table. I sat down slowly and opened it. "This is yours in case they ever forget who you are." Robert, that's all it said. No explanation, no date, I set the note down and looked around again. Every detail felt familiar, even though I'd never stepped foot in this house before. The curtains were the same pattern I used in our first home. The bookshelf had the same order of titles Robert kept back in Asheville. It wasn't just a house. It was a backup version of our life, one he had created without telling me. I stood and walked into the kitchen. The pantry was stocked, canned vegetables, boxed pasta, jars of peanut butter, bags of rice. Nothing expired. The fridge was unplugged but clean. There was even a grocery list taped to the inside of the cabinet door, written in his handwriting, just staples: coffee, bread, eggs, sugar. The table in the corner had two chairs, a placemat on each side. It looked like he'd planned for both of us to be here. I opened the drawers. Everything was labeled measuring cups, tea towels, spare batteries, like he knew someone might be opening them for the first time. I walked down the hallway and peeked into the bedrooms. One had a quilt on the bed, neatly folded, a small lamp, no dust. The other room was empty except for boxes stacked in one corner. Some were marked Elizabeth's things. I didn't open them yet. I didn't know if I was ready. Back in the living room, I sat on the couch and stared at the fireplace. Robert had done this for me. Not just in case something happened, but in case the people closest to me forgot how to treat me. He had watched it happen. The slow shift, the way Thomas stopped calling regularly, the way Linda took over holidays, the way I kept making excuses for both of them. He knew, and instead of saying something that might tear the family apart, he built me a safety net, one I didn't even know I had until now. I picked up the note again. This is yours in case they ever forget who you are. It hit me differently the second time. He wasn't just talking about a house. He meant me, my worth, my identity, the person I used to be before I started shrinking myself to keep the peace. Before I stopped saying how I really felt. This house, this little farmhouse, was his way of reminding me I was still someone worth showing up for. I made tea in the kitchen using the kettle on the stove. I found a tin of chamomile in the cabinet, sat by the window with my cup, and just looked out at the yard. There was a birdhouse in the back, another bench near a patch of dead grass that might have been a flower bed in spring. It was quiet, but not empty. I could almost hear him saying, "It's not much, but it's ours." I stayed there most of the morning, just walking through each room, letting myself feel every part of it. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. There was something calming about knowing he'd thought this far ahead, that he'd made a plan, not out of fear, but out of love. And the strangest part, Thomas didn't know this place existed, which meant he couldn't take it from me, couldn't sell it, couldn't control it, couldn't say it needed managing or convince me to downsize. This was out of reach. It was mine, just mine. I looked around the living room again, the photos, the chair, the coat by the door, and for the first time in almost a year, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt found. 3 days after I visited the farmhouse, I got a phone call. I almost didn't answer it. I don't usually pick up numbers I don't recognize, but something told me to press accept. "Mrs. Elizabeth Carter," the man asked, formal but not cold. "Yes, speaking. My name is William Reynolds. I was your husband's accountant." I sat down. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," he said. "I've been meaning to call, but I wasn't sure if now was the right moment." I told him it was fine. Truth was, I didn't know what the right moment was anymore. "Well, Bob," he continued, "Robert left some specific instructions regarding his trust. I was only to contact you if something changed, if anything didn't feel quite right with the family." He paused like he was testing the waters. "I take it you've had a change in how things feel." I looked at the red envelope on the table, the one Linda had sent with the courier on Christmas Day. "Yes," I said quietly. "I suppose I have. I think it's time you and I sat down. There's some information your husband wanted you to have should circumstances shift the way he feared they might." He didn't say Thomas's name. He didn't have to. We met the next day at a modest office in South Asheville. His place was on the second floor of a brick building with a bakery downstairs, the kind of spot you walk by a dozen times and never notice. Mr. Reynolds was older than I expected, late 60s maybe, trim gray hair and kind eyes behind simple glasses. He shook my hand like he meant it and led me into a room filled with filing cabinets and old pictures of mountain trails and lighthouses. Once we sat, he pulled out a slim black folder. "Before we begin," he said, "I just want to say, your husband was a very smart man, and a careful one." I nodded. He always had a backup plan. "Exactly what Reynolds said. Robert kept most of his financials straightforward, but 5 years ago, he quietly moved a portion of his retirement savings into a separate trust. In your name only, fully private. It's not listed on the family portfolio." I blinked. "I didn't know about that." "He didn't want you to, not until it mattered." He opened the folder and turned it toward me. "There's a little over 650,000 in here, conservatively managed, not touched since he set it up." I stared at the page. My name printed clearly at the top. No joint holder, no successor. He called it the just-in-case fund. Mr. Reynolds said, "If anything ever happened to him and you felt pressured or shut out, you'd have your own footing." My hands felt cold. "I had no idea." He nodded. "That was the point. He didn't want anyone to convince you to part with it before you were ready. Not even him." I sat back. Why would he think I'd need protection? Mr. Reynolds gave me a careful look, then pulled out another paper. "Because of this," he said. It was a short summary, a history of financial requests over the past decade. 3 stood out right away, each one from Thomas. "Your son came to Robert for help," he explained. "First time was in 2014. Said he wanted to open a home remodeling business. Robert gave him $25,000 as a gift. That didn't surprise me. I remembered Robert saying something about it years ago. Thomas had sent a thank you card, even brought flowers. Then in 2016 he asked again, this time for $75,000. Robert said no." I raised my eyebrows. "Thomas never told me that." Mr. Reynolds pulled another paper. "Robert said no again in 2019. Same request, new spin. This time it was Linda's dream of flipping houses. Robert still said no." "Did they ever find out about the trust?" "No," he said. "But they pushed hard on him in that last year. Called often, sent emails. Robert showed me some of them. He handed me copies. I read them slowly. One said, 'We just want Mom to be taken care of, but we need more control if we're going to help you manage things.' Another read, 'We can't do long-term planning if everything's still tied up in Mom's name.' There it was, hidden behind concern, polite on the surface, but every line was asking for the same thing, power. Mr. Reynolds let me read in silence. When I finished, he said, 'There's something else.' He reached for one more document. It's from 2018, a bank flagged it. The paper was a copy of a cash check. It had my signature on it or something that looked like it. This was a withdrawal for $15,000, he said. Drawn from your joint account, marked for house updates. Your signature was close, but not exact. I looked closer. It was my name. All right, but not my hand. I never wrote this. I know. Robert kept quiet about it because he didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. But after some digging, he found the trail. The check was handed to a contractor in Tennessee for a rental property Linda was managing. My mouth went dry. They forged my name. Mr. Reynolds nodded. Robert confronted them quietly. Linda denied it. Thomas said it must have been a mistake. But Robert told me that after that day, he started separating more of the assets. I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry you're learning all this like this, he said gently. But your husband wanted you to know the full picture. They've been waiting for my name to disappear. I whispered. He nodded. Robert believed so. His exact words were, they're not planning for her future. They're planning around it. I sat there for a while. holding the folder in my lap. So much made sense now. The rushed visits, the way Linda always asked about paperwork, the way Thomas danced around money, never asking me directly but always bringing it up. Mr. Reynolds leaned forward. The trust is yours, Miss Carter. No one else can touch it, and there's more coming. What do you mean? Robert arranged a transfer from a small account he kept under a business LLC. He left instructions to move it if this meeting ever happened. I looked at him. How much? Another 82,000, he said. I shook my head. He never told me? No, he said. But he didn't hide it to hurt you. He wanted you to feel secure without having to ask for it. This was about giving you options. I felt my throat tighten. He stood and handed me the folder. Everything you need is in here. I'll help with the paperwork when you're ready. There's no rush. As I left his office, the cold hit me hard. I stood outside for a moment, breathing in the winter air. My whole life had just shifted again. Robert had been gone almost a year, but he was still here in his quiet way, still taking care of me, still one step ahead. And now I saw what he saw. I wasn't crazy for feeling shut out. I wasn't imagining it. They had plans that didn't include me, but now I had one of my own. So I got back from Mr. Reynolds' office just before sunset. The sky was a dull gray and everything felt quiet, one of those cold days where the air bites at your cheeks before you even reach the door. I parked in the driveway and grabbed my bag off the seat. I didn't even make it to the porch before I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Thomas's. I stood there for a second, just watching it, engine still running, headlights on, and in the passenger seat, Linda. She was staring at her phone like she hadn't even noticed I'd pulled up. I walked up the steps, turned the key, and stepped into the warmth of my house. Before I could even take off my coat, I heard footsteps behind me. Mom. I turned. Thomas was on the porch. He didn't smile. He just shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and looked like he was forcing himself to seem calm. We need to talk. I nodded and held the door open, but only just enough. He didn't step in. I know Christmas was messed up, he started. Messed up. I didn't say anything else, just waited. He shifted on his feet. Linda thought it'd be easier to spend it at her mom's this year. Things got busy, and we didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. He rubbed his neck like the words were itchy coming out. You could have called, I said. I know, I should have. That's on me. Another pause. I could hear the car still running behind him. Linda hadn't gotten out. Thomas looked down, then back up. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Here it comes. About Dad's stuff, he said. The old accounts. I've been going through some of the files he left in the garage, and I thought maybe if you needed help sorting anything financial stuff, maybe some of the paperwork I could help. I stared at him. He looked just like Robert in that moment. Same brow line, same eyes, but that expression, that tone that wasn't Robert, that was something else. What made you think I needed help? I asked. He blinked. Well, you've been quiet and we've been worried. I leaned against the door frame. You haven't called in 3 weeks. I know, but things have been hectic. Linda's been trying to get the business going, and we're looking at refinancing the house. You mean the rental house in Tennessee? He froze. I saw it hit him. He hadn't expected me to know that. How did you? Don't worry about how. I said, just answer me one thing. He looked at me, waiting. Did you know she forged my name on that check? He looked away. That was answer enough. I let that hang in the air a moment, then stepped back and opened the door wider, not to invite him in, but to make my next words clear. You weren't checking in on me, I said. You were checking on what I have. Mom, no. Don't interrupt. He closed his mouth. I know about the trust. I know about the accounts Dad moved. I know about the requests you made, the ones he turned down. He looked like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Except this time, it wasn't cookies. It was my future. You think I don't know when someone's playing nice just to see what they can get? He stepped forward. It's not like that. We were just trying to make sure things are manageable. For who? For you. You've been through a lot. And you figured now was a good time to step in and take over. He didn't answer. I looked past him toward the car. Linda still hadn't moved. She's not coming in, I asked. He shook his head. She thought it'd be better if I talked to you alone. She's probably worried you'll say too much. Mom, you're overthinking this. No, I'm finally thinking clearly. He shifted again. I don't need help managing anything. I said, I've got everything I need. Robert made sure of that. His jaw tightened. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, he said, softer now. I nodded. I am. For the first time in a while, he stood there, not knowing what to say. The cold started to creep into the doorway. Go home, Thomas, I said. Tell Linda I said hello. He opened his mouth like he wanted to fight back, but then he thought better of it. Without another word, he turned and walked back to the car. I watched him climb in, watched Linda lean over to say something. The car backed out, paused for a second at the end of the driveway, then drove off. I closed the door. The house was still warm. The windows had fog slightly from the cold outside and the heat inside. I wiped one clear with my sleeve and watched the car disappear down the street. They didn't come to fix things. They came to test the waters, to see what I knew, to feel out what they might still have access to. And now they knew I wasn't going to hand anything over. I wasn't going to shrink myself or apologize for not being ready to forget what they'd done. Robert saw this coming. He didn't leave me the farmhouse just for peace and quiet. He left it to remind me who I was. And now I was starting to remember. 2 mornings later, the phone rang. It was just after 7:00 a.m., and I'd barely poured my coffee. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. Then I saw the name flash across the screen. Patricia Wright. I picked up right away. Morning, Patricia, I said. She didn't even say hello. Elizabeth, have you heard what Linda's planning? My heart skipped. What are you talking about? She's telling folks, mostly her side of course, that you're not well, that you might need someone to step in legally. What? A cousin of mine heard it from her sister-in-law who still works at the courthouse in Westville. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What exactly did she say? They're saying you're showing signs of confusion, that you've been isolating, that you're unstable. She said the last word carefully, like it tasted wrong coming out of her mouth. I didn't respond right away. She's trying to build a case, Patricia said. And if she's serious, they could try to challenge your ability to manage your affairs, your house, your money. It didn't even surprise me. She's clever, I said. Always careful not to get her hands dirty directly. Smart enough to know you've got something she wants, Patricia replied, but not smart enough to realize you've still got fight in you. I let out a breath. I didn't want to believe it would come to this. I know, honey, she said gently. None of us want to believe that about our own. But here we are. Patricia had been my neighbor for almost 20 years. A war widow, sharp as a tack, straight talking, and the kind of woman who never let her tea steep too long or let a lie hang in the air. You're not crazy, she said. You're just waking up. There's a difference. That one sentence hit me harder than I expected. I stood at the sink for a while after we hung up, watching 2 cardinals hop around under the maple tree, my hands still on the phone, not moving. I wasn't crazy. I'd spent so long doubting myself, wondering if maybe I was just too emotional, too sensitive, too nostalgic. But now I saw it clear as day. This wasn't about emotions. This was about power, about control, and I was standing in the way of what they thought they deserved. Later that afternoon, Patricia came over. She brought her laptop, a binder full of printed templates, and a loaf of cornbread, like she always did when something serious was about to go down. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one Thomas and Linda hadn't sat at in years. All right, she said, flipping open the binder. We're going to put this in writing. No more games. No more waiting. We drafted a formal letter, direct but respectful. It outlined that I was of sound mind, managing my personal affairs, and fully capable of making legal decisions. We included a note that I'd be retaining counsel going forward and that any attempt to challenge my capacity would be met with full resistance under the law. She even included a copy of a notarized statement I'd made at her church the month before affirming my health and state of mind. I added one line at the bottom in my handwriting. I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am simply done being treated like an afterthought. We printed it out, signed it, scanned it, and sent it certified mail to both Thomas and Linda. Patricia leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. There, she said. They can't say they weren't warned. I stared at the letter sitting in the outgoing tray, the ink still drying. I'm done begging to be loved, I said out loud. Patricia looked at me. Say it again. I did, and it felt like something in me broke free. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was letting go of the part of me that kept waiting for them to come around, waiting for them to act like family, waiting for some version of the past to walk through the door and apologize. But that version of the past didn't exist anymore. After Patricia left, I stood by the front window and watched the light change outside. The air was sharp and cold. Frost lined the edges of the glass. The garden was quiet, but I wasn't. That night, I sat down with a notepad and wrote out my own list. Not things to fix or cook or organize, but things I wanted to do for me. Not for Thomas, not for Linda, not for some idea of the family we used to be. For me, take a day trip to Charleston, paint the back room at the farmhouse, start the garden early this year. Just flowers, nothing edible. Write Robert a letter. Simple things. But every word felt like a piece of myself I was putting back together. And as I sat in my quiet living room, one thought kept circling back around in my head. They walked away, but I didn't disappear. This world has enough people waiting to be chosen. Some of us finally choose ourselves. So, a week after we sent the letter to Thomas and Linda, I got a knock on the door. It was early afternoon while I was home folding laundry in the living room, a rerun playing low on the TV. I peeked through the window first, out of habit now. It was Mr. Reynolds. I opened the door and smiled. You didn't call. I didn't want to, he said, holding up a small cardboard box. This needed to be handed over in person. I stepped aside and he came in, carefully setting the ball on the kitchen table. It wasn't big, about the size of a shoebox, but taped neatly with my name on top in Robert's handwriting. I felt a little dizzy just seeing it. Robert gave me this the week before he passed, Mr. Reynolds said. Told me not to hand it over until I was sure you were ready. He paused, then added, You're ready. He didn't stay long, just long enough to explain that this wasn't legal paperwork. It's personal, he said. He wanted it to be just between you and him. Wood nodded and walked him to the door. Back inside, I sat down with a cup of tea and slowly opened the box. Inside was a leather-bound journal, dark green, the kind Robert used to buy at the stationery shop downtown, the one that closed 5 years ago. I ran my fingers across the cover. It was worn at the edges. He'd filled it. The first page simply said, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say all this out loud. So here it is, all of it. No more holding back. I turned to the next page. He wrote every entry by hand, the ink smudged in a few places. Some words crossed out, others circled. He dated each entry. They began almost exactly 1 year before he passed. The first few entries were simple updates on how he was feeling, things he'd noticed, the weather, my favorite meals. But by the 5th page, the tone started to change. He wrote about his fears not of dying. Robert never feared that. He feared what would happen to me after. He wrote, Elizabeth is the strongest person I know, but strong people get tired too. And if she's tired, she won't ask for help. She'll just smile and keep serving everyone else until there's nothing left for herself. He was right. He went on. Thomas has been distant. I've noticed it's not just work. Linda has a way of making him feel like I'm a chore, like Elizabeth's old-fashioned, like she's someone to be tolerated instead of treasured. I sat there, my hands shaking slightly, page after page. He poured out everything he saw but never said. He talked about the late-night talks we used to have, the way I used to hum while folding towels, the way Thomas used to run into my arms after school and how slowly that boy disappeared. Robert didn't just see the changes. He felt them, and he knew I was feeling them too, even if I hadn't said a word. Halfway through the journal, he wrote something that stopped me cold. If you ever find yourself sitting at our table alone, wearing that red dress, waiting for someone who doesn't show, know that I saw it coming, and it has nothing to do with you. They left, but you are still here, and you are still enough. I had to close the journal for a moment. I pressed my hand to my chest and took a few deep breaths. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear landed on the page. When I kept reading, I found entries where he started planning. He had met with Mr. Reynolds, talked through what to do if things turned cold. He had the farmhouse titled in my name, created the private trust, and had one more thing I hadn't known about a foundation. It wasn't big yet, but it had a name, the Elizabeth Carter Fund for Independent Women. He wrote, I've set aside a small sum to start. It's not much now, but with time and the right people, it'll grow. It's meant for women like Elizabeth, widows, grandmothers, caretakers who've spent a life giving and one day realize they have been left behind. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My name in his handwriting, not as just a wife or mother, but as something more, as someone who mattered, not for what she did for others, but for who she was. He wrote a mission statement, listed ideas, places to reach out to. One note said, maybe Patricia can help get the word out. She's got that church newsletter. I laughed through my tears. He knew how things worked in this town. Toward the end of the journal, his handwriting got shakier, shorter entries, more gaps between dates. I could tell he was getting tired. But the final page, it was written slowly, with care, no corrections. Just one final thought: if they choose to walk out of your life, let them. What's meant to stays. What's meant to love you'll. That did it. I held the journal against my chest and sobbed. Not the kind of crying that breaks you, but the kind that cleans you out, that makes room for what's next. I stayed there a long time, letting it wash over me. All the fear, all the guilt, the waiting, the wondering, the quiet prayers I never said out loud. Robert had already answered them, not with flowers or big speeches, but with steady love, with plans, with truth. And now I finally saw what he'd been trying to show me all along. I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming. And no one, not even family, could take that away from me. 1 year later, same house, same porch, same month, but everything feels different. I wake up on Christmas morning, and there's a quiet peace in the air. Not the kind that comes from hoping, but the kind that comes from knowing. The farmhouse smells like cinnamon and roasted sweet potatoes. The oven hums gently. Patricia's already in the kitchen, banging around pots like she owns the place. And honestly, I don't mind one bit. I pour my coffee and sit at the table while she stirs her pecan glaze. You really went all out, Elizabeth, she says, eyeing the 2 pies cooling on the windowsill. Just enough, I say, smiling. They'll eat every crumb. Because this year, I invited people who actually show up. I sent out the invitations in November. Nothing fancy, just some little cards from the dollar store. I handed a few to the women at the Senior Center's quilting club. Others went to the young man who runs the art program at the church. He brings in local kids once a week for painting and drawing lessons. Some of them don't have much, but they sure know how to make a room feel alive. When I told them I was hosting dinner, they didn't hesitate. We'll be there, they said, and they meant it. At 3:00 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rings, and then again and again. Voices fill the house. Coats are hung, hats tossed in the basket by the stairs. A little boy named Marcus runs straight to the living room, pointing at the tree. "You got real candy canes," he shouts. I laugh. Only way to do it. Within half an hour, my house is buzzing. Every chair is filled. The table is loud and bright and full of food. Patricia's fussing over the gravy. Gloria from the quilting club is telling a story about her high school sweetheart. Someone turns on a record player, and Bing Crosby hums in the background. It's not perfect. Someone spills juice on the tablecloth. The ham is a little overcooked, and one of the teenagers accidentally knocks over a vase in the hallway. But I've never felt more full. The tree in the corner is smaller than last year's, but it sparkles with handmade ornaments from the kids. Little snowmen made out of cotton balls, paper stars colored with crayon, not store-bought, real. And then there's the card. It arrived 3 days before Christmas. No return address. Just a small cream envelope with my name written in Thomas's handwriting. Inside, "Merry Christmas. Mom. Hope you're doing well. Thomas and Linda." No apology, no mention of last year, no phone call, no invitation to anything. Just a card. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I just placed it in a drawer. Because this year wasn't about them. This year was about building something new. Last year, I waited, I cooked. I set a table for people who never planned to show up. This year, I stopped waiting, and that changed everything. After dinner, some of the kids go outside to play with the new sidewalk chalk we handed out as gifts. The grown-ups sip coffee and nibble leftover pie. Someone starts singing along to Silent Night. I slip out to the porch with a glass of red wine. The sky is streaked with soft pink and gold. Cold air nips at my cheeks, but I don't mind. It's real. It's clean. It reminds me I'm alive. Behind me, Patricia laughs loudly at something. Her voice carries through the open window, and I hear her shout, "You better not be sneaking another roll." "Marcus," I smile. The porch light flickers on, casting a warm glow across the steps. I sit down in Robert's old rocker and wrap the blanket tighter around my shoulders. I think about him. He would have loved this. Not just the food or the music, but the way the house feels. Alive, open, honest. He always said, "You don't need blood to build a family. You need heart." Turns out he was right. And maybe it took a year of heartbreak and silence and facing truths I didn't want to see. But I finally stopped hoping the people I loved would turn into people who loved me back the right way. And I started loving the people who already knew how. I look back through the window. The table is full again. Different faces, different names. But it's full. And then it hits me. This is the dinner that mattered. Not the one I waited for last year. Not the one that left me with a cold plate and a quiet phone. This one, this table, these people. I sip my wine and lean back in the chair, listening to the sounds of life spilling out of my home. The days between Christmas and New Year's pass in a blur of small joys. I spend mornings at the farmhouse, working on the back bedroom. I've turned it into a studio of sorts. Nothing fancy, just a table by the window. Some shelves I built myself, not perfectly, but they hold, and a bookcase filled with art supplies. I started painting again last spring. Just simple things, at first flowers from the garden, the view from the porch. Then I tried a portrait of Robert from an old photograph. It doesn't look exactly like him, but it feels like him, and that matters more. Patricia says I should sell them at the farmer's market in the spring. People love local art, she insists. I tell her I'll think about it, but the truth is, I don't paint for anyone else. I paint because, after 50 years of cooking and cleaning and taking care of everyone, I finally remembered something I used to love just for me. On New Year's Eve, I host a small gathering at the farmhouse. Just 5 of us: Patricia, 2 women from the quilting club, the young art teacher from church, and his wife. We play cards and drink hot cider with cinnamon sticks. No one mentions resolutions or regrets. We just enjoy being exactly where we are. At midnight, we stand on the porch and watch fireworks in the distance. Someone hands me a glass of champagne, and we toast to new beginnings. I think about last New Year's Eve, how I sat alone in the big house, waiting for a phone call that never came. How different everything feels now. The first week of January, I get a call from Mr. Reynolds. He wants to meet about the foundation. Robert's little seed money has been growing steadily. He says, there's enough now to start something real. We meet at a coffee shop downtown. He brings paperwork and projections, all very official. I bring ideas, lots of them. I've been thinking, I tell him, spreading out my notes. We need to focus on practical help, not just money, but workshops, classes on finances, legal advice, help navigating insurance and Medicare, all the things women my age were never taught because someone else was supposed to handle it. He nods, taking notes. Robert would be proud, he says. No, I correct him. Robert would say, I told you so. We both laugh, and it feels good. We decide to start small, a quarterly workshop at the senior center, a scholarship fund for widows going back to school, a mentorship program pairing older women with financial advisors willing to donate their time. What do you want to call it? He asks. I think for a moment, the second chapter fund, I say finally, because that's what it is, not the end of the story, just a new chapter. On my way home, I drive by the old house. I still live there most days, but it feels different now. Less like a museum of what I've lost and more like a launching pad for what comes next. I pull into the driveway for a moment, just looking. I remember how cold it felt last Christmas, how empty. Now I see the bird feeder I hung last spring, the new flowers I planted along the walkway, the wind chime Patricia gave me that catches the afternoon light. It's still my house, but it's not my whole world anymore. In late January, I get a letter. The return address is from Tennessee, Thomas's handwriting, but not a card this time. A real letter, 3 pages long. I sit at the kitchen table to read it, hands steady. Mom, I've been trying to write this for weeks. I start, then stop, then throw it away and start again. Nothing sounds right, but I need to say this, even if I say it badly. I'm sorry, not just for Christmas, though that was awful and inexcusable. I'm sorry for the years before that, for the distance I let grow between us, for the times I didn't stand up when I should have, for the check, yes, I knew about it. I didn't stop it. That was wrong. Linda and I are separating. It's been coming for a long time. Maybe you saw that too. You always did see more than I gave you credit for. There's a lot I could say about what went wrong, but the truth is I lost myself somewhere along the way. I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who could forget his own mother on Christmas, someone who could let greed come before family. Dad would be ashamed of me. I'm ashamed of me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I'm asking for it, but I wanted you to know that I see what I did. I see who I became, and I'm trying to find my way back, not just to you, but to myself. I'm staying with a friend right now, trying to figure out what comes next. Linda's keeping the house. I don't want it anyway. Too many ghosts. I miss you. Mom, I miss Dad. I miss who we used to be as a family. I don't know if we can ever get that back, but I hope someday I can be someone you'd be proud to call your son again. With love and regret. Tomasi, fold the letter carefully and place it back in the envelope. I don't cry, I don't call him. I just sit with it, letting the words settle into my heart. Part of me wants to rush to him, to say all is forgiven, to try to fix everything. That's the mother in me, the nurturer who spent a lifetime smoothing over rough edges. But that's not what either of us needs right now. Instead, I write back, a short note, honest but not cruel, Thomas. Thank you for your letter. I'm sorry to hear about your separation, but I hope it brings you clarity. I spent too long waiting for things to go back to how they were. I've learned that's not how life works. We don't go back, we go forward. Maybe wiser for the journey. I'm building a new life. It's different, but it's good. I hope you find your way to something good too. I'll always be your mother. That doesn't change. But trust that takes time to rebuild. Take care of yourself. Mom, I mail it the next day. No rush delivery, no tracking. Just a letter finding its way to my son, who's finally finding his way back to himself. February brings a cold snap. I spend more time at the farmhouse, where the fireplace keeps the living room cozy. I've been filling the place with little touches, a quilt I made for the couch, wildflowers in mason jars, a bookshelf full of novels I never had time to read before. I join a book club at the library. 6 women, all over 60, all with stories that could fill volumes. We meet every other Tuesday, drink tea, and talk about everything except our children, unless we want to. It's refreshing. One day, my phone rings. It's Thomas. Mom. He sounds different, softer somehow. I got your letter. Good, I say. I was wondering. He pauses. Would it be okay if I came to visit sometime just to talk? No agenda. I just miss you. I take a breath. That would be fine, but not at the house. Where then? There's a place in Hendersonville, a farmhouse. I'll text you the address. A farmhouse, I didn't know you had a place there. There's a lot you don't know. Thomas, that's part of the problem. He's quiet for a moment. When would be good for you? We set a date for the following Saturday. I don't tell him about the foundation or the trust or anything else. Those conversations can wait. This is just a beginning. After I hang up, I walk through the farmhouse, looking at it through new eyes. What will Thomas see when he comes here? Will he recognize his father's touch in every corner? Will he understand what this place means to me? I decide it doesn't matter. This isn't about him. It's about me having a space that's mine, that can't be taken away, that reminds me of who I am when no one else is watching. The day of his visit, I get there early. I make coffee and set out some muffins I baked the day before. Nothing fancy. I don't want it to feel like I'm trying too hard. When his car pulls up, I watch from the window as he steps out. He looks thinner, older somehow. He stands in the driveway for a moment, looking at the house, hands in his pockets. I meet him at the door. Hi, Mom, he says. Thomas. I step aside to let him in. He walks slowly through the entryway, taking it all in. I see him notice Robert's jacket on the hook, the familiar lamp in the corner, the pictures on the mantel. Dad did this, he asks finally. I nod. For me, in case I needed a place that was just mine. He always was one step ahead, Thomas says quietly. We sit at the kitchen table, Mastavaisu. The conversation is awkward at first, stilted, careful. We talk about the weather, about his wound, about neutral things, but eventually, the real conversation starts. I didn't know about this place, he says. There's probably a lot I didn't know. Your father was a private man. He kept things close. Not from you. Not the important things. No. Thomas looks down at his coffee. I let you down. I know that. I let him down too. You let yourself down, Thomas. That's the real tragedy. He nods, accepting this. I keep thinking about last Christmas, how I just let it happen, how I didn't call, didn't show up, didn't even have the courage to tell you myself. I was a coward. Yes, I say. You were, He looks up, surprised by my directness. I'm not going to make this easier for you, Thomas. You're a grown man. You made choices. They hurt me deeply. I'm not going to pretend they did it just to make you feel better. I don't want you to, he says. I need to face it. All of it. We talk for almost 3 hours. He tells me about the years with Linda, how slowly things changed, how money became everything, how they both lost sight of what mattered. He tells me about the arguments, the pressure, the growing distance between them. She wanted more than I could give, he says. Or maybe she wanted more than I wanted to give. I don't know anymore. I tell him about my year, about the trust, about Patricia, about the foundation, about painting again. I show him the studio in the back room. He stands in the doorway, looking at my canvases lined up against the wall. "You're really good, Mom," he says, and I can tell he means it. "I'm learning," I say. "It's not about being good. It's about doing something that makes me happy." When he leaves, we don't hug. We're not there yet. But he thanks me for seeing him, and I tell him he can come back sometime. Small steps. I watch his car disappear down the gravel drive, and I feel, oh, peaceful. Not overjoyed, not fixed, not healed completely, just peaceful. Like maybe, someday, we might find our way to a new kind of relationship. Not what we had before, but something honest, something real. I walk back into the farmhouse and pour myself a cup of tea. I sit by the window watching the birds at the feeder Robert built, thinking about beginnings and endings and how sometimes they look so much alike. Spring comes early to the mountains. By mid-March, the forsythia is blooming along the road to the farmhouse, bright yellow against the still bare trees. I plant a garden at both houses, vegetables at the main house, all flowers at the farmhouse. Peonies, Robert's favorite. They'll bloom in May, big and blousy and perfect. The first workshop for the Second Chapter Fund is a success. 12 women attend. We talk about finances, yes, but also about grief and loneliness and finding purpose, about building a life that fits who you are now, not who you used to be, about choosing yourself when no one else does. Afterward, one woman stays behind. She's about my age, neatly dressed, hands that won't stop fidgeting. "My son moved me into a condo," she tells me, "sold my house without asking, said it was too big for me, too much work, but it was mine. 40 years in that house, and now it's gone." I take her hand. "What's your name, Virginia?" she says. "Virginia, tell me what you loved about your house." Her eyes fill with tears. "The kitchen window. It faced east. I could watch the sunrise every morning while I made coffee." "Your condo, which way do the windows face?" "West," she says. "I see the parking lot." I nod. "Let's see what we can do about that." I introduce her to Patricia, who knows a realtor, who knows someone selling a small house with an eastern exposure. It's not her old house. Nothing could be. But it's a place where she can see the sunrise again. Sometimes that's enough. By June, the foundation has helped 3 women find new housing, set up 5 more with financial advisors, and started a weekly coffee group that meets at the farmhouse. Not therapy, exactly, but healing all the same. Thomas calls every other Sunday. Our conversations are still careful, but less strained. He's rented a small apartment, started seeing a therapist, reconnected with old friends. Small steps toward a life he chose, not one that was chosen for him. He asks about the foundation, offers to help with the website. I let him. It's a small thing, but it matters. Repair happens in tiny increments, not grand gestures. In July, he asks if he can come for the 4th, just for the afternoon. No pressure. I say yes. I don't prepare a big meal. We grill hamburgers on the back porch of the main house. Patricia comes too, acts as a buffer when the conversation lags. He brings a small gift, a set of paintbrushes he saw at an art store. "The guy said these were good for watercolors," he says. "I noticed you didn't have many at the farmhouse." It's a thoughtful gift, specific, something that says, "I was paying attention." When he leaves, we hug briefly. It's awkward, but real. Patricia watches his car pull away. "Well, she says, that wasn't so bad." I laugh. "No, it wasn't. You think he's really changed?" "I consider this. I think he's trying." That's all any of us can do. And so the year goes. Seasons change. The foundation grows. I split my time between the main house and the farmhouse, less from obligation than from choice. I have friends now, real ones, who show up, who call just to check in, who bring soup when I have a cold. I hear from Linda once, a stiff email asking about some old family photos she wants for a project. I mail them to her without comment. Some bridges stay burned, and that's okay. Thomas and I find a new rhythm. Not what we had, but something sustainable, something honest. The week before Christmas, I invite him to dinner. Just us. I'm hosting a big thing on Christmas Day. I tell him, friends, neighbors, the whole works. But I thought maybe the night before we could do something quiet. If you want. I'd like that, he says. When he arrives on Christmas Eve, I notice he's brought a small tree for the table, just a tiny Fraser fir in a pot with simple white lights. I remember you always liked a real tree, he says. We eat beef stew and fresh bread. Nothing elaborate. We talk about normal things, his work, my painting, a book we've both read. After dinner, he helps with the dishes without being asked. Later, we sit in the living room with the lights low except for the tree. I can see Robert's chair from where I sit, empty but not painfully so anymore. I've been thinking about Dad a lot, Thomas says. Me too. He knew, didn't he, about how things would go? I nod. He saw it coming. That's why he set things up the way he did. The farmhouse, the trust. He was protecting you. Not just protecting, I correct him. Empowering. There's a difference about the... Thomas is quiet for a moment. I wish I could talk to him. Just once more. Tell him I understand now. He knew you'd figure it out eventually, I say. He believed in you, even when he was worried. That never changed. Thomas looks around the room at the stockings still hanging on the fireplace, at the old ornaments on the tree, at the pictures on the wall. 50 years of family history, good and bad, all of it real. Tomorrow's going to be chaos here, isn't it? He asks. All your friends and neighbors. Absolutely, I say. Noisy, messy, wonderful chaos. Would it be okay if I came? Not for long, just to drop by. I look at my son, this man trying so hard to find his way back to something true. Yes, I say. I think there's room at the table for one more. The next day, Christmas arrives in a flurry of activity, people flowing in and out, food everywhere, laughter filling every corner of the house. Thomas comes in the afternoon, brings a bottle of wine, helps Patricia carry chairs from the garage. He doesn't stay long, but he's there, present, trying. After everyone leaves, I sit on the porch alone, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. The sky is clear, stars bright as diamonds above the trees. I think about Robert, about his quiet wisdom, about how sometimes love looks like letting go and sometimes it looks like holding on, and how the trick is knowing the difference. I think about the empty chair at last year's table and how it taught me to fill my life with people who show up. I think about second chapters and how they're rarely what we expect, but sometimes exactly what we need. Inside, the house is quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet. Not hollow, not empty, just resting, holding the echoes of laughter and conversation, waiting for the next gathering, the next celebration, the next ordinary day. I lift my glass to the stars. Merry Christmas, Robert, I whisper. You were right, I was always enough. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believe it. If you've ever had to rebuild from heartbreak, you know the journey never really ends. But as I sit here under the winter sky, I know this much is true. Tables can be refilled. Hearts can be mended. And sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after you think the story's over. If you believe no one should face that journey alone, share this story. Comment with your city. I'd like to know where kindness still exists. And remember, sometimes the most powerful words you'll ever say are, I am enough, just as I am.